Hey there. Welcome to another episode of Board Gems, my weekly series in which I highlight an older game. Maybe it's not crazy old, but anyway, it's a game that hobbyists have moved on from, and there's all sorts of shiny new games out, and I just like to highlight some of these older games and point out that they're still good and we should still be playing them. A lot of the Board Gems, they bring something kind of new, unique to the table, literally. But anyway, they're special in some way. They haven't been fired by newer games. This week we're going to be covering a game about the stock market, and it's called Black Friday. Right here. It's designed by Friedemann Friese and was actually not published by his own company. It was published by Cosmos in Germany back, I want to say, around 2010. It's for 2 to 5 players, ages 12 and up, which is, it's a little bit complicated, a little bit involved, and takes about, I would say it takes about an hour to play. What does the box actually say? 55 minutes. Okay, well, I was pretty close. There's a lot of board games about the stock market. In fact, I have one here called Stockpile, which is a pretty newer one. It's got pretty high ratings, too. It's a pretty good game. Check it out. One thing that Black Friday does that no other board games do, no other stock market board games do, is it has this arc in which everything starts off low, and then the values of certain things based on player actions, the values of certain stocks are going to go up and up. It trends upwards, but the longer the game goes on, the more volatile the market becomes. And at some point, usually there's this big market crash. And the game is actually about investing, buying stocks, seeing those stocks go up in value, but then selling those stocks before the big market crash happens. So it's a really unique take on the stock market, one that's really fascinating. So I'm going to show you how it plays first, and then afterwards I'll show you why I think it's a board gem. To set up the game, place the board on the edge of the table. Set the board in the middle of the table. Each player is going to get one of these small shields. It has a little player aid on the inside to show what you can do on your turn. Take the money, it's paper money. There's denominations from 1 to 100. Sort them out and put them nearby. And do the same for the subsidies. These are the subsidies. The range in values, there's a 1, a 2, and a 5. Just sort them by value and put them near the board in reach for all players. You're going to take these tiles, which show sort of the current state of the market, what players are allowed to do, and you're going to sort these by value with the start on top and then 2, 4, 6, 8. Note that they're double-sided, so the 1 is back here, the 3 is here. So you're going to put these in order and you're going to place them here. Now in this bag, you're going to have a whole bunch of these briefcases. 5 different colors, which represent different investments in the 5 industries. You're going to take 2 of each color, and you're going to fill these colored spots on what are called the sales tables. Four more of each color is going to be set aside to the side of the board to form the market. That's the area in which players can take shares, buy shares from, and sell shares to. Now the rest you're going to place back in the bag. Now I believe there's 25 of each color, so that's 6 and 4 is 10. So there's 15 of each color remaining. You're going to use all the briefcases for 5 players, but for every player you're playing fewer than 5, you're going to take a briefcase away. I'm going to set it up for a 3-player game, so I'm going to remove 2 of each color. And these just go out of the game. So you're going to take all the remaining briefcases and you're going to put them in the bag. There's 15 black briefcases. You're going to put 1 on every one of these black spaces.
On the side of the board here.
Now each player, we're going to mix up this bag, and each player is going to draw 5 briefcases from the bag and secretly place them behind their player screen, so only they can see. And then finally, again, we're doing a 3 or 4 player game. One player is just going to pull another additional 20 briefcases from the bag and add them to the market.
So there's not going to be that many fewer briefcases remaining in the bag, but more will be added later. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. There we go.
Now, for the rest of the bag, you're actually going to put this big $ wooden piece in the bag. And the only purpose this serves is as a reminder. And finally, we have these tokens, which represent, for these colors, the current share price of each of the investments in these industries. So these are going to start on the 7, that's the starting space, and as you can see, it's marked there. And you have 2 silver markers. One of these is going to be placed on this track, which represents how much silver players have purchased this round. And this marker is going to be placed at the bottom of this track, which is the current price in silver. And you'll see it starts at 20 and it goes to 100. The game also comes with these tiles, which represent one-time use special actions that you can do. This is to offset the fact that the starting player has an advantage, and the second player has an advantage over the 5th player. So you can give these out to kind of balance the game. I would recommend for the first game, or even first couple of games, don't bother with these. Yes, the start player has an advantage, but while you're still figuring out the game, that's probably not going to come into play that much. Just have the youngest player start if you're playing in a family setting. And the goal of the game is to buy silver. The player with the most silver, this is the silver and gold here, the player who has the most silver at the end of the game wins. Technically, the player who has the most gold wins, but a gold represents 5 silver. Once you get 5 silver, you turn them in and get a gold. The player with the most gold wins. If that's a tie, then it's the player with the most remaining silver wins. And if that's a tie, the player with the most money wins. Now, do you start with any money? Actually, no. Not in the first edition, not in the English rules, but apparently in later printings, maybe for the German edition, they had it so you start with a subsidy. These are subsidies, and they're not loans. It's very important to distinguish subsidies from loans. This is free money from the government. Each subsidy will give you $20. And at regular points during the game, which we call price adjustments, you'll have to pay interest, $1 for every subsidy you have. And unlike a loan, you never pay these back. You never have to. You don't have to pay them back at the end of the game. You just pay the interest periodically throughout the game. So in later editions, they actually set it up so you start with a subsidy. Just to make it clear, because you start with no money and you start with some briefcases, it may be tempting for a player who's never played the game before to sell some of their shares to make money that way to avoid taking subsidies. Don't do that. If I can give you one bit of advice, if this is your first time playing, try not to sell briefcases early in the game. Subsidies are for this purpose, to get your starting capital with which to buy more shares. And then later, as the price of these investments, these shares go up, then you can sell them and make more money. But take advantage of the subsidies. So the goal of the game is to buy silver, and this is the current price of silver. You're going to want to invest in the stock market. These are the 5 industries you can invest in. And over the course of the game, these values are going to be going up, and whatever number is in these spaces, that's the current value. So all of these investments start at the value of 7. And gradually over the course of the game, the market is going to improve. It's going to be a bull market. So the values of the industries are going to go up and up and up. And at some point you may want to consider not just buying shares, but now selling them for a profit, getting a lot of money, and then with that money, either buying more shares or buying silver. Remember, that's the goal, is to buy the silver. Over the course of the game, as the shares march up this board here, the market will become more volatile. And that's represented by these black briefcases, which will get added to the bag. And when they are drawn, briefcases are drawn from the bag during what's called a price adjustment, which I'll explain later. These black briefcases may trigger a market crash. If it's a small number, it's not that big a deal. It's just a kind of a slowdown of the market. But if you draw a lot of black briefcases at once, that's a market crash. And the share prices may have been gradually going up over the course of the game. They may suddenly drop right down. So a big part of the game is building up these shares, increasing their values, selling at the right time before there's a market crash, and then using that money to buy silver. And the game ends because the price of silver is going to go up at the end of every round and during what's called the price adjustment. And when the marker reaches here at 100, the game is over. And then all the players will sell whatever shares they have at whatever their current price is on the market, and then they can buy as much silver as they want at $100 a pop. So in general, the goal of the game is to make money, enough money that later on you can buy silver. You don't want to buy silver necessarily too early in the game, but you want to make money. And the best way to do that is to buy shares or investments in these 5 industries. Right now, the price starts very low, so it's pretty cheap. So I'll describe a little bit of the board. This area of the board shows the current stock price of each of the stocks. So if it looks something like this, for example, then you can see to buy or sell a yellow share would cost 81. To buy or sell a blue share would cost 19. But they all start on the 7. They all start pretty low. These purple areas of the board are the tables. And there's one set of tables for every different action you can do. And you can do 3 actions, one of 3 actions on your turn. You can buy shares, you can sell shares, or you can buy silver. And this table is used to buy shares. This is used to buy silver, and these are used to sell shares. Whenever you do one of these actions, the briefcases that are placed or are already on these tables is going to change. At the beginning of the game, you're not worried about these ones. You're just going to look at this one. This is the sales table at the start of the game. So you care about these 3 tables. Every time you buy shares or buy silver, a briefcase from the market is going to be added to the corresponding table. So if you buy red, for example, red's going to come up here. If you buy silver, then this marker is going to move based on the number of silver you buy. And again, you get to take one of these briefcases from the market and add it to the silver table. When you sell shares, those shares are going to be returned to the market, and you're going to remove one of these briefcases, one of the colors you've sold. So if you sold yellow, you would take one of these briefcases and return it to the market. And whenever one of these 3 tables has exactly 5 briefcases, we're talking about a 3 or 4 player game, exactly 5 briefcases. So if this table fills up with 5 briefcases, or this table fills up with 5 briefcases, or, not counting the black one, 5 briefcases are remaining on this table, so 5 have been removed, that triggers what's called a price adjustment. And in the price adjustment, the values of these shares are going to change. The price of silver may change based on how many black briefcases came out and how much silver people bought. So if people bought a lot of silver, the price of silver is going to go up. And more briefcases are going to be added to the market. And after every price adjustment, that table is going to clear. And any shares that are here are going to be added to the bag. During every price adjustment, briefcases are going to be pulled from the bag. And briefcases pulled from the bag is good for that color. If you pull a lot of yellow, the value of yellow is going to go up, or it's going to go down less if there's a crash. So you want colors that you're invested in on these tables. If you have a lot of yellow, you want yellow on here, either yellow briefcases added to these tables, or to not have yellow briefcases removed from these tables. Whatever's remaining on these tables during a price adjustment is going to come off and go into the bag, which means they're more likely to appear in the next price adjustment. And when a color appears, it's good for that color. So just generally keep in mind that briefcases on these tables are good for that color. Now this area shows the current levels of the stock market. So when the stock market is low, that's the starting location, that's the starting value here, then you have all the markers have not gone past this kind of light green area. And this shows the current rules of the game. This is how many subsidies each player is allowed to have, maximum. This is how many shares or silver you're allowed to buy or sell, in the case of shares, on your turn. And this is how many briefcases will be pulled from the bag in the next price adjustment. After a price adjustment, if these markers are starting to come up, I mean, some might go down, but some might go up, and you'll see now the markers have reached a new threshold, the 1, you're actually going to flip this over to show the 1. And now it's a little bit more volatile. Players can have more subsidies. They can have up to 3, still buying or selling at most 1 share of silver, and you pull 6 briefcases from the bag, more. As you can see, as these values are going to come up, this is going to become more and more volatile. Whereas you can see if markers have reached here, the 6, players can have at most 8 subsidies, and they can buy or sell 4 shares or silver. And you're pulling 9 briefcases from the bag. And when you're pulling more briefcases from the bag, you're more likely to draw black briefcases. Black briefcases are what, A, trigger the price of silver to go up as well, but also cause a pull on all the values of shares. Whenever a sales table triggers a price adjustment because there's 5 colored briefcases remaining, all these briefcases go into the bag, including this black one. And then you're going to move on to use this sales table after that. And if that one triggers a price adjustment, you're going to be adding these black briefcases to the bag, and so on for that one. And every time you reach a new level, so in this case we go to level 1, you're going to be taking one of these briefcases, you'll see 1, and adding it to the bag, all the way up to level 9. And the more black briefcases are in the bag, the more likely there's going to be a crash. And this little table here looks really confusing, but I'll walk you through it during a price adjustment. It just shows graphically how these markers will move depending on how many of that color is drawn. So you imagine the marker is here, and if you were to draw during a price adjustment 2 yellow briefcases, you look for the 2, and it's right here. It's up and to the right. So I forget where I had this. It would move up and to the right. You'll see there's also negatives. How can there be negatives? Well, that's where the black briefcases come in. Each black briefcases subtracts 1 from the value of every share. So if you're pulling a lot of black briefcases, you can see the values for a lot of them might be quite negative, and they'll go down and to the left quite a bit. And 0, there's just a general drag on all shares that don't have any activity. So if it's not coming, the color's not coming out of the bag, then it's just going to go down a little bit. So let's just talk about what you can do on your turn. You can do 3 actions. You can buy shares, you can sell shares, or you can buy silver. You can also pass. Passing is basically choosing to buy silver, and the amount of silver you choose to buy is 0. You do the same thing as if you buy silver, which is you're going to be adding a briefcase. Remember, every action you do is going to change one of these tables in some way. Another thing you can do is you can gain subsidies. And I recommend at the start of the game, every player just automatically start with 1 and get 20 bucks. You can have at most 2 in front of you. So as soon as you get a subsidy, you take $20 from the bank and add it to your supply, and just keep the subsidy in front of you. And that's basically the flow. So anytime during the game, during your turn, you can get a subsidy, and then you do one of those 3 actions, or pass. Buying a share simply means that you take one of the shares that's currently in the market, and you take it, and you pay the current price, which of course right now is 7. So you pay 7 to the bank in this case, and you take this briefcase and you put it behind your screen. And then you take another briefcase of the same color from the market and you add it to this table. If there are no briefcases left in this supply, So you take, say, the last red and there's no red left, then you can add any color you want to here. Whenever a color is completely bought out, at that moment somebody removes the last share of a color. Either they bought it or it's the last one and it got added to this table. Immediately the value of the stock goes up one. That's if all the color, as soon as one color is drained from the market, its value will go one space to the right. So it'll go up a little bit. Later on in the game, you'll be able to buy multiple shares. You can buy multiple shares of one color or any variety you want. You could buy one red, one orange, one yellow, or four blue, or whatever combination. You pay whatever the prices are for those colors, but only one briefcase gets added to here, and you choose which color comes on board. It's always a color that you bought if you're able to do that. Now, buying silver results in basically the same thing happening, but here on this table. So you can buy as much silver as is shown on this tile, which at the beginning of the game is just one, but later on it can be more. That's the maximum amount of silver you can buy in one turn. So at the beginning of the game, if you want to, you can spend $20, that's the current price of silver, and buy one silver. And put it behind your screen, and then move this marker up one to indicate you bought one silver. If you bought 4 silver, then you would move it 4 spaces. And as soon as you have 5 silver behind your screen, you immediately replace it with a gold. Just a little reminder to the other players to indicate how much gold you have. It's kind of like, oh, this person has 5 silver. So, hey everybody, this person's winning. Now, in both of these cases, as soon as 3 of any single color gets added to this table, it doesn't have to be in a row, but let's suppose players are just, the price of shares is cheap, so everybody's buying shares. I'm going to buy this, and I'm going to buy that, and it looks something like this. And then the next player's turn, they decide to buy green. If they buy green, so again, they would buy a green, it goes behind their screen, and they bring another green, and they bring it up here. As soon as you see 3 of the same color on either of these 2 tables, immediately the value of that stock goes up, or goes right. Now, in the case of selling, it's basically the same thing, but in reverse. So at the beginning of the game, you can sell at most 1 share. You would take one of the shares behind your screen, and you would return it to the market. And then you remove the same color from this table, like this. And this also goes back to the market. And if there's none of that color remaining, then you can remove any color you want that's still on. But it has to be a color you sold. So again, later on in the game, if you're selling multiple shares of different colors, you just choose one of them, your choice, to remove from the table. And one thing is, every time a color is sold, the value goes down, or to the left one. But again, only one. So if you sell multiple shares later in the game, you're going to choose, and there are multiple colors, you're going to choose one of these colors that you sold to remove, and you're going to choose one of those colors that you sold to move to the left 1 space. And they don't have to be the same color, they can be different colors. But every time there's a sale, one of the values is going to drop. Play is going to go like that around the table until this fills up with 5 briefcases, or this fills up with 5 briefcases, or this has 5 colored, ignoring the black one, has 5 colored briefcases remaining on it. And then that triggers a price adjustment. And the price adjustment is the big thing in this game. First, the player whose turn it is, who triggered the price adjustment, reaches in the bag, because you're going to pull out briefcases. You're going to pull out this many briefcases, in this case, 5. At the start of the game, the first price adjustment you're bringing out 5. And you feel, what is this thing? Oh, hey, everybody pay interest on your subsidies. And just set that aside. So for every subsidy you have, at the beginning of the game, you can have at most 2. For every subsidy you have, you'll pay $1 to the bank. So if I have 2 subsidies, and you can always make change. So if you have 2 1s, you can exchange them for a 2 whenever you want. If you have 2 subsidies, then during a price adjustment, you have to pay $2. $1 for every subsidy. It's possible that because you've invested all your money, you actually don't have any cash with which to pay the interest. It's not the end of the world. What happens is you just flip over your subsidies to the vulture side. And what that does is that acts as a reminder that on your next turn, you must get money. You could even get more subsidies if you want to pay for the interest of these subsidies. If you can't get any more subsidies or you don't want to, you would have to sell shares. But you have to do something on your next turn that gives you money. Then when you get that money, you pay the interest, and then you flip over all your subsidies again. So the more subsidies you have, the more interest you pay, but they're just dollars. And then you're going to pull this many briefcases from the bag. So in this case, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. Now what happens? Well, for each of these colors, you look and see how many of that briefcase has been drawn. So I usually like to go in this order. So if we look at yellow, no yellow briefcases have been drawn. So the 0 is 1 space to the left, so the yellow marker moves 1 space to the left. But blue has 3. And from this space, 3 is 2 spaces up. So blue is actually going to go up 2 spaces. 1 red, that's 1 space up. No green, 1 space left. And 1 orange, 1 space up. These briefcases get added to the market. And then whatever briefcases are on the table that triggered the price adjustment, because if it was one of these tables, it would be full of 5 briefcases, or if it's this one, there'll be 5 briefcases left. All those briefcases go into the bag. So they're more likely to come out later. If you are heavily invested in a particular color, you want that color on these tables, because that means that later on they're going to be going into the bag and they're more likely to come out later. Whenever the sales table triggers a price adjustment, not only do these colored briefcases come off the table, but also this black briefcase. And then after these are put in the bag, then later on, you're not going to refill, you're going to just use this table. And when this triggers, you're then going to use this table. And so more black briefcase is going to be in the bag. Now you'll look and see, in this case, oh, we've now reached a new threshold, we've reached 1. So a couple things happen. First of all, we reveal this to show the 1. In the case that the values actually go down, you don't return old ones to this pile. This number is always going up. So if later on it's 4 and then there's a big market crash, it just stays at 4. But in addition, because now we're on level 1, so the level 1 black briefcase goes into the bag. Now what happens when black briefcases get pulled from the bag? Well, let's say you're pulling 6 and you pull these 6. If it's just one briefcase, black briefcase, not much happens. Every black briefcase that's pulled adds 1 to the value of silver. So this would go up 1 space. But otherwise, one black briefcase does nothing, and this will actually go back into the bag. But if multiple black briefcases are pulled, let's say you had to pull 8, or let's say you had to pull 9, and this is what was pulled. This is a market crash. So every one of these colors has this number subtracted by 4. This subtracts 1 from every color. So yellow, instead of being 0, is actually -4. So you'll see it would actually go down 2 and over 1 to the left. So if yellow was here, the result is it would go down 2 and to the left, and it would be there. And even blue, which has 3 minus 4, is -1. So blue would go down 1 space like that. But, silver lining, I guess, is these black briefcases will not go back into the bag. You're just going to set them aside. And so that particular market crash is not going to happen again. For each of those black briefcases, again, the value of silver would go up. The value of silver also goes up for every one of these spaces that this marker has reached. So in a round, if players are buying a lot of silver, and the marker's here when a price adjustment happens, then you're going to add 2 to the price of whatever the silver is. Now these briefcases, when they're pulled from the bag, will go into the market. And at this point, you look at the market and you see, is there any color missing? Because that could be the case. All the shares are bought and none were pulled from the bag. In this case, that's a really hot share. Let's say it was red, this would then go up 1 space. So that's something that's easy to forget. One of those little rules that's easy to forget. And at the end of the price adjustment, you're just going to reset this marker to 0, and then just continue on to the next player. You can put this back in the bag if you want, just to, again, to act as a reminder. Once you've played this game a lot, you probably won't even bother with this. If at the end of a price adjustment, the value of silver is now 100, then there are no more turns. That's it. The game is over. Then players sell whatever shares they may still have at whatever their current prices are. And then you're going to have a wad of cash, and you can use that remaining cash to buy silver at this final price of $100 per bar. And again, every 5 silver bars that you have, you exchange them for 1 gold, and then you reveal the amount of silver and gold that you bought. And the player with the most gold wins, and if it's a tie, then it's the tied player with the most silver wins. And if that's a tie, then it's the player who has the most money left over, up to $99, because they couldn't buy 1 last silver with it. Whoever has the most money left over of those tied players wins the tie. And that's it. You're ready to play Black Friday. The stock market is a really great topic for a board game because it has both some tactics, some strategy, some thinking. You know, you're trying to decide which companies to invest in, but there's also the luck. You don't know exactly how the stock market's going to go. The gambling aspect of stock markets, a lot of stock market board games capture that aspect really well. But I would say a lot of them don't have much of an arc. Stockpile, this is not a review of Stockpile, but Stockpile is an example of that, okay? So if we play a 3-player game of Stockpile, we're playing, I think, 7 rounds. And each round is basically the same. You are carrying stocks forward through future rounds, so that influences it. But generally speaking, every round plays out the same. The results are going to be different. But there isn't an arc. What you're doing in round 6 is the same as what you're doing in round 1. And that's something I really, really like about Black Friday, and to me makes it the best stock market game because it has an arc. The stock market starts low, it starts cheap. You buy those things and the stock market goes up. Not every stock will go up, you know, if everybody's avoiding blue, blue's going to stay low, but based on player actions, a lot of the stocks are going to go up in value. And also you have a sense of which players own what, which becomes a, you know, as a big factor when you're deciding which stocks to sell, which to have the values go down. But generally speaking, the market's going up, and all the players have to make that decision as to when to jump off because there will probably be a market crash. I've played many different types of games. One in which things were going super, super high, then there was a massive crash. And sometimes it wouldn't really go up that much before the crash would happen. Sometimes it never really crashed. There was just kind of a drag on prices, so they'd go down a bit, and then, okay, you work hard a little, you know, you buy more stocks, you know, it goes down a little bit more, right? So sometimes the market's gonna go like this, actually, as opposed to like that. Or sometimes it kind of levels off. It's like a little mini crash, right? And then you have to decide, well, based on how long the game lasts, should I be buying more stock or was that it, right? That's really interesting. And it's a really different experience that I haven't seen in other board games, especially other board games with the stock market anyway. That not only does it have that built-in kind of variability, but it has that volatility, you know, like as the stocks are going up very high in value, everybody's looking should I be buying silver? Like this good crash could happen anytime. And you know what, I play this with my son all the time, and there's lots of times I'm a little more cautious than he is. So it's very often actually where the stocks will be going up and up and up, and we kind of know how many black briefcases are in the bag, so we know what the risk is. And I'll sell all my stocks expecting the crash to happen any minute and start buying silver. My son, maybe he has some of the same stocks I do. He rides out the storm a little bit. He holds on, and then that price adjustment happens and the crash doesn't happen. And that stock that I had bought and sold early, expecting a crash, now is up 75% more in value. And now my son has got $1,000 and he can buy as much silver as he wants. And I'm like, oh, right. And at that point, you know, you lost the game. But that's the amazing aspect of it. And although there is luck in the game, of course, when you're pulling out the briefcases, it's under control by the players. You know what's going into the bag. At the beginning of the game, you know what's in the bag because, generally speaking, because you don't know what stocks players start with, but you can see what's in the market and you can go, okay, there's not much blue. So either there's a lot of blue still in the bag or players own a lot of blue, right? But either way, you can make decisions based on that, right? So, and it can be hard to see for new players coming in. The theming is really, really strong, but it doesn't really work in an intuitive way. So it can actually be a little challenging for new players coming in to understand, like, well, why am I, like, which stock should I buy? Like, you know, obviously I want to buy something that's low that's going to go up. How do I know what's going to go up? So when you're teaching the game, it's really important to explain about the tables and say you want briefcases on these tables because later on they're going to go into the bag, and so they're more likely to come out later. And it's important that people understand how stocks go up in value, why they go up in value. When people buy a lot of a stock, the value is going to go up, but it might not go up right away, right? Just because something goes in the bag doesn't mean it's going to come out right away. It could come out 3 or 4 price adjustments later, but the odds are increased. So the fact that Black Friday is able to capture those market trends and that those trends are not entirely random, there's a lot of control among the players as to what goes in the bag, but you don't know when it's going to come out. That's the randomness aspect. And of course, the big thing is judging when that crash is going to happen. It's a really great game. Now, I should say the rule book is really short. It's only like 5 or 6 pages. And I read it and like, I think I understand. And then I try to set up the game and it's like, I have no idea what's going on. The rule book is a challenge. When you know the game, you can go back to the rule book and go, yeah, I guess everything's in there. But it's very hard to learn the game from the rules for some reason. Check Board Game Geek, the file section. There's lots of player aids and stuff that people have made. Hopefully my video has helped if you're unsure at all. This game is worth it. Okay, it is hard to learn this game. It is hard to learn. There's even, in the file section, there's even flowcharts. Like, when a price adjustment happens, what do? You do this. Does the market look like this? No, okay. And that looks really complicated, but it's not that bad. And the game is really worth it. This is the best stock market game I personally have ever played. And it's never going to leave my collection. This is a permanent fixture in our collection. And it's my son's favorite game. It's a game I happen to like quite a bit. This is definitely a board gem. So thanks for watching. And remember, older games like Black Friday don't stop being good just because new games come out. Take care.